Welcome back. It's my great pleasure to introduce Philip Aiken. Philip is was the artistic director of Obsidian Theatre Company from July 2006 to June 2020. Obsidian is passionately dedicated to the exploration, development, and production of the Black voice. Philip has directed 51 plays, garnering 11 awards and 5 nominations, including, and I feel it's important to list a number of these, 2 Toronto Theatre Critics Awards, 2 Dora Awards, a Merit Award, the Herbert Whittaker CTCA Award for Distinguished Contribution to Canadian Theatre, the Premier's Award for Excellence in the Arts, the William Kilbourne Award for Celebration of Toronto's Cultural Life. He's a lifetime member of Actors Equity, Playwrights Guild of Canada Women's Caucus Broad Door Award for supporting and promoting the work of Canadian women playwrights, the Mallory Gilbert Leadership Award, which I want to asterisk, is very interesting because that is an arts management award that a prestigious artist also has, and I think that's very interesting to how I perceive arts leadership. The Tapa Silver Ticket Award for outstanding contribution to the arts, and last but not least, runner-up last year for Globe and Mail Canadian Artist of the Year. Welcome, Philip Aiken.
Thank you. Boy, that sounds really impressive, doesn't it?
It's just your resume, dude.
I know. I wish my mom was alive to hear all that. She never wanted me to go into the arts. So I wish she was around to do that. I have to say hi to Chick Reed, who I have known since 1976 from Jump. Wow. From Regina, Saskatchewan, I believe. Chick was the first time we met. So yeah, it's, and I'd like to say thank you to all of you who are here today. So I'm going to just ramble on about a few things, and please, if you have questions and stuff, like kick them out, and I'm happy to have that conversation as well. I was interested, just a bit of a segue, I was interested in some of the conversation as I came in, listening to what happened in your breakout sessions. And there's a lot, I heard a lot of aspiration, and I think that's great. And I think that as artistic leaders, you need to have both aspiration, and you also need to have a code of conduct and a code of what you will and won't do if you want to hold true to them. So a lot of people start in the business and they have high hopes and, great plans. And then you all find yourself saying things like, yeah, I would like to pay all of my artists at 2 levels above scale, but, oh, I would like to do this, but. And the minute the but comes into the conversation, it means there's a compromise. And it's really easy to compromise. It's really easy to say, yes, I support all these artists, but we had to cancel the show for COVID, so we're not going to pay them their 2-week salary. There's a lot of good reasons for the but, and I urge you all to not accept that. Every time you hit a but, it means that you should have changed your entire concept of how the project was going to go forward so that you could live up to what you wanted. I'm not going to hold up like Obsidian was perfect, but you know what? We stuck to our beliefs. A lot of companies you'll find have posters on the wall. They're always really great. They say, here are the 7 values that we have as an organization, and honesty, respect, blah, 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 blah. All of which are nice and big and juicy and actually don't focus in on anything. What's respect to one person is not respect to another person. So at Obsidian, we came down with very precise things. One of our first codes of respect was dance with the one that brung you. And if you always keep that in mind, it means every person that you have a relationship with, you respect them and you dance with them and you always thank your dance partner so that they always get the kind of accolades that they should get. We believed in everybody gets paid. And that sounds pretty reasonable, except if you're working for most charitable organizations, they will say things like, hang on, I'm going to just pull this out here. That's me making that high-pitched sound. So if you work for most charitable organizations, they have a lot of people who want to volunteer. And Obsidian was no different. People would volunteer to be ushers, to be light walkers, to be whatever. And if you say everybody gets paid instead of respect, because I believe there's no better respect than paying people, all of those light walkers got paid by Obsidian. All of the volunteers, quote, ushers who came to work at our shows got $25 a session. $25 is not going to make anybody's life hugely better, but it means somebody comes and interacts with Obsidian, helps us out. They can go get a Starbucks, they can go get a small meal, they can go home, and they're not out of pocket. That is a true manifestation of respect. So if you have those kind of big value systems up on your wall, you need to put those down into micro values that you will always, always do. At Obsidian, we paid all of our actors 2 levels above scale. Do you know how scale is worked out? Equity scale. So we would pay 2 levels above scale. I don't think that we paid less than, I don't know, $850, $900 odd dollars a week for an actor. And we're talking people who could be playing in 140 seat houses. That's huge for actors. But it's what we would do. We would always run into issues when we were co-producing with multi-million-dollar a year companies who said, Philip, we really support actors, but we don't want to set a precedent. We can't afford to pay all our actors at that level. And I would say to you, then if you can't afford to pay your artists and the people on your teams above and beyond what the baseline is, you don't have enough money to do your show. All of this co-op doing shows for a Starbucks card is bullshit. Building a company, there's a company here in Toronto that has built their rep on doing all of these wonderful site-specific shows. Their artists, designers, technicians get paid crap. They're building their art on the backs of their artists. And you, as the next gen of artistic leaders, you have to make that decision. Are you going to work to build the situation where people can be paid appropriately so that they don't end up with a cat food retirement in 40, 50 years? Or are you going to be expedient and say, hey, I'd love to, but. So I leave that with you as something to think about. It's not just money. So Obsidian, we were a Black theater company, so that's how we ran. I've done a lot of talks. I've done too many talks on diversity and anti-racism and the like. And in truth, I may have to do one more, but I'm so bored. I'm so bored with hearing myself talk about it because I've been saying the same things for 40 years. And it's now the shiny of the month. As you can tell, I just rewatched Firefly, so everything is shiny or not shiny. And I believe it'll be gone in it's already tapering off, and in a couple of months, all of that stuff will be gone. But it's about creating spaces where people can be their real self. And I deliberately don't use words like unsafe, because that's a word that everybody has their own definition for. And if you have a room full of 15 people with 15 definitions of one word, then there is no congruity, there is no sympathetic understanding. So it's a room where people can be their authentic selves. If you are not white, what that means is a room you can walk into and you don't have to code switch. I'm a big believer that every rehearsal hall, every room that I'm in is a black rehearsal hall, a black room, even if I'm the only black person in it. And so what does that mean? It means I don't code switch. I talk about my culture, my life, the music, the art, the whatever, coming from a black perspective, because it's past time where black people have, in historical sense, have been unpaid labor to build the countries, and now people seem to want us to be unpaid labor to help change your organizations. And I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that, right? Like, people need to work. We look and bring an audience into the theater, and I believe the audience has a job. The job is to work, to understand the play, not to be spoon-fed, not to have everything homogenized. You know, the difference between a homogenized Stilton and a pure milk unhomogenized Stilton. Two great but different cheeses. And I believe that people need to come into the theater to work, to understand, to go on the journey with you. I said a few things to Michael, and he sent me a list that he wanted me to touch on, which was kind of cool. The whole thing about diversity, which is so prevalent these days and rampaging around, is, frankly, I find it easier to deal with racism than to deal with anti-racism. So just think about that for a moment. It's like, I learned pretty much what it was like to be a black man in this country by the time I was 8 years old. And that's a long time ago. And so I know how to deal with that. Anti-racism somehow obliges me to take whatever it is I'm feeling or understanding or my knowledge of the world and to trot it out in a semi-public forum where it can be discussed, manipulated, maneuvered. Maybe the organization's going to change, maybe they're not. All I know is that a bunch of black people need to go out and bare their souls and their pain to better other people. I'm not believing that that's a great upside. I like to put that kind of work into my own life or into the art, but not to somehow believe that it's going to make a substantive change. I know, I'm on a couple of boards and for one for the Shaw Festival, one for the Koffler Foundation, and one for the Canadian Contemporary Dance Theatre. And they're all primarily white organizations. And one of the reasons I'm on those boards is because I'm not white. But I don't want to become a one-trick pony. And I think that if you are looking to run an organization that is open and welcoming to other ethnicities, and you happen to be white, then there have to be touchstones and people in that organization who can do the reach out to those communities who are of those communities. Otherwise, you bring in somebody and they're just as isolated. What does that one lone black, apprentice coming into your shop, what weight is on them to be all things to all people and to be used as a marketing strategy by your organization. And so what kind of burden do they have to bring forward before they can get to the place which is, yo, I just want to learn how to get better at this job. So how do you make your organization open and honest in a way so somebody doesn't have to bring on the burden of an entire race to go and learn how to be a carpenter, right? Specific things. We are at this moment in time because we've seen a lot of Black people get killed. And we can watch it anytime we want to go on YouTube or Facebook. We're here because of the death of Black people. George Floyd is a touchstone for a lot of people. For me, I go back to Emmett Till, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. And we get to this point, and at this junction where Black issues should be first and foremost in everything, what happens is that's never enough. There's always other people, other organizations, other cultures, all being pigeonholed and attached to what should be a Black moment. And I find that very, very depressing and very upsetting, because it's a time where we can make one substantive change. And the fact of the matter is the more stuff you put on it, the duller your blade gets. And we should be at a moment of precise focus. But it's like the rabbit mind. We try to say, oh, but what about this person? What about this person? What about this group? What about that group? I don't believe you can pull the entire burden of oppressed peoples, all of them, into the same situation at the same time. I think this is the work of years. It took years to get here. It's the work of years to fix things. One of my favorite sayings is, everybody wants to be Black until it's time to be Black. And so that indicates a big distrust from my point of view. I'm not apologetic about it, but I know it's not an expected thing these days. I want to talk about the value of words, and I think in terms of leaders, words are hugely important. I have this conversation all the time. We use, I don't use it, but people use the word agency a lot, right? And so somebody says, oh yes, they have agency in this moment. And I think at its core, that is one of the most pernicious weasel phrases, weasel words ever. Because to give somebody agency means that I have power and I give you an opportunity to speak or to act. But that also means I can take that away. And so I go, of what value is that when your other choice is to have power? Because if you have power, you can institute the ideas that you believe in. If you have power, you can come as an equal to somebody and not as a supplicant. And if you want to lead, you have to lead from a base of power. However you build that power is up to you. I'm not saying that my way of doing it is your way, but you need to find a way of building that. There's often talk of, you come into the room and diversity means you're in the room and inclusion means you sit at the table. And, I think you may have all heard that about coming around, we're all going to meet at the table. And it's another one of those really pernicious things, because at no point does anybody say who owns the table, right? So yeah, it's great that you get invited into the room, but you don't own that table. And I think it should be the mark of every artistic leader who wants to make a profound change, is to know that they need to own tables, right? Because then you're meeting as equals. I don't know, one of the reasons why we have had, or I have had, issues with a number of organizations that I've worked with is that they always believed that they were doing Obsidian or Philip Aiken a favor. And I always said, I'm not here to be a supplicant. I'm not here to get a favor. I'm here because we are two artistic individuals working together. I'm an equal. And I think that sense of equality has to come from inside each of you, and you have to stand up and claim that space, take that space, not get agency into it so somebody can punch you out later. Ideals versus pragmatism. Gosh, that's. I wish I knew what I meant by that when you wrote that down, Michael. But I saw, to go back to what I heard when I first came in, I love the idealism in a lot of the talk that was there, but at the same time, pragmatically, I have a lot of questions. I don't know if I have any answers. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, much less 5 years, but I believe, from my understanding of the way the funding works in this country, that the councils have guaranteed that the 2021 fiscal year, all theater companies will get the same amount of money as they got in 1920. There is no guarantee past 2021. I think 21, 22 is going to be like standing on the train tracks when the train hits, because the governments have mortgaged our grandchildren's future, and they're going to want to find ways to balance budgets, cut back, whatever. And the arts is one of the easiest ways to do that. The OAC, the Ontario Arts Council, has been already in a cutback mode. And so I think it's going to be hugely problematic, because if the funding stream is truncated by the governments, there is very little opportunities in the new world that we live in now to recoup that money. So, for example, talking with Tim Carroll down at the Shaw Festival, and if you put in physical distancing guidelines in the big theater at the Shaw Festival, it's like, what, 800 seats, right, Chick? Something like that. And if you put in that, you can put in 20% of the seats, right? 20%. The operating model of a place like the Shaw is that your main stage shows have to run at 80% capacity in order to fund all of the smaller productions in the smaller spaces. In fact, I've done 5 shows at the Shaw, and most of them were sellouts, huge sellouts, and really didn't add much to the bottom line compared to what it cost. The money driver is those 800 people in the show for 40, 50 performances a year. So to pull that out leaves a huge hole. That doesn't mean that theater can't be done on a smaller scale. It doesn't mean that it can't be done online. How you monetize that online, that's to recoup that kind of money. I think at this point, nobody knows how to make that work. So it means that there's a huge funding hole. And if there's a huge funding hole, it means that where are you going to cut costs? Well, it's going to come in productions, it's going to come in salaries, it's going to come in a lot of different ways. So how as a leader do you look to find that or to shape your vision? It's money is a huge thing. What I have found from a lot of people is that people build an inflated revenue section and then match that inflated revenue with expenses. Usually it's box office, which, you know, is heavily inflated. So let's say you estimate $250,000 from all sources of revenue. And so you build your expenses at $250,000. But what happens then when you have a shortfall on the revenue side? You've already spent your $250K in expenses. And so you end up in a negative situation, which means that you were counting on box office to save you. And now that it isn't there, you've got a deficit. And then you get into how do you handle a deficit and that whole nightmare. So you have to be, I think, particularly stringent on your revenue projections so that you keep your expense section short. So at Obsidian, I budgeted at a 30% house. There were shows that we didn't get 30%. There were shows that we got 80%. But what that meant was by keeping our revenue projections low and therefore our expenses low, we always, virtually always, made enough money so that our biggest problem the day that I left was we had too big an accumulated surplus. All right? I tell that to Tim Carroll all the time just to make him get mad at me that I have too much money. So it's a hateful thing to say to most theaters, but that's what you have to look at. How do you build over the long term, not just one season, 2 seasons, but on a long term? How do you program and manage to keep a surplus so that you can then do that risky show, you can make that technological leap, you can do what you need to do to both keep an audience growing and yet challenge them at the same time. So it's a bit of a juggling act. Michael read out a whole bunch of awards and stuff, and I have to say the Mallory Gilbert, the one that I got for arts administration, was my first big award, and also one of the ones that I'm proudest of, because I think that what's happening right now in a lot of organizations is what I call the twin-headed dragon, where you have the board at the top, you have an artistic director reporting to the board, and a GM or an ED reporting to the board. And the functions inside your organizations now get split. One hand deals with money, one part deals with art. And there's no assimilation. So if you're going out to be an ED someplace, I assure you, you will want an artistic leader who understands your audit, who understands the numbers game, and vice versa. And I think that's one of the beauties of the model I had at Obsidian, was that everybody was involved in all of the discussions. Yeah, sure. I mean, I had the final say on things, but in terms of money and the art and what works, what didn't work, there was a synergy, and that synergy was based on the things we believed in, and the automatic bigging up of our artists and making sure that they had the best experience possible, so that it kind of made up for all the crap experiences they had at other theater companies. I don't know, Michael. I think I've run out of your time.
Well, you covered everything. Thank you so much. Just so you know, ideals versus pragmatism, I think you hit it right at the beginning of your talk. So
okay. Okay, good.
You hit it all. Thank you so much. It was so relevant to the moment and so relevant to arts management. So we are very appreciative of this talk.